Hello there. My name is David Lonigan, and I am the director at Framework Recruitment. And today I'm speaking to Chris Archer. Chris ran a successful architectural glazing company, and now he helps companies in the sector and outside the sector scale and grow. Good morning, Chris. Could you give everyone outside of that little introduction, a little bit brief introduction to yourself and your career journey?
Yeah, of course, and thanks again for having me here this morning.
Pleasure, sir.
So you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I did the journey that I think most people in the industry do, from some point of installation right the way through to deciding that they want to set up their own company, and that's exactly what I did with a good friend of mine. So I suppose I'm a curtain wall and window installer by trade. In my younger days, and whilst working on an installation project in Bond Street with a very good friend of mine, we decided that we could run a business better than everybody else in the country. And what a stupid thing to think that was.
No, but also again, I was at a client yesterday, and so we was talking about that sort of not necessarily like it's stupid to do this, but fortune favors the brave, right? Of course it's a risk setting up a business, but that's why there's reward. Like the rewards absolutely navigate with the risk, right? They're there,
Absolutely.
they're present.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he who dares wins, to quote a great philosopher. Um, and yeah, so we decided on that day that we were going to set up a business, and we set up this company, and it had very little in terms of planning, very little in terms of what we wanted to do and what goals we wanted it to hit and what problems we wanted it to solve. We just assumed because this particular project wasn't going so well that we could do it better. There's a bit of a fast forward, and I'll tell you roughly where that ends, and then we can sort of pick at bits on the way if you like.
Yeah,
But
go for it.
take that forward 7 years, and we actually we sort of managed to grow a business at its peak to 3.5 million in turnover, with a fully functioning factory, which we had feedback several times that it was the McLaren of window manufacturing, from many of the sort of extrusion reps that came to visit. So we obviously did something right, um, but I won't sit here and say that there wasn't anything we did wrong,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, 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 yeah.
because there certainly was. So I've seen all, I would say almost all of the facets of the glazing industry and the facade
You
sector.
poor man.
Yes, yes, yeah. I haven't aged well. I'm actually 19. So yeah, very well bruised. But when I say all facets, I've been involved in the higher end multi-million scale, commercial projects, education sector, retail sector, London stock refurb. I've been involved in domestic dwellings, one-off and self-build and multi-plot. I've kind of seen it all. Anywhere that you can put a window, I've seen it.
We've had a bit of a theme on these on the people I've talked to because they represent from, as you said, the commercial high end facade side all the way to the sort of residential, then high end residential stuff. And I think there's definitely a theme, and one of them is, apart from the scars you mentioned, just how joyless the tier one contract sort of delivery can be. I guess, yeah, I imagine you're the exact same opinion. It seems like, although we're the specialist contract, I still call myself we as if I'm that side, but
On behalf
that's
of the industry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And but irrespective, just how yeah, that just because ultimately our side is the specialist subcontractor. We are needed. Our skill, our expertise, our product knowledge, and product are needed. Yet to use a term that a previous client used, we're treated like a hat full of snakes, and you just pull out a snake, ring it till it's done, throw it away, and just grab the next snake. I have real hope that that's something that can be addressed moving forward in the sort of as we start talking about things like the JCI, because obviously that's very much focused at the skills and competency and behaviors of the individuals. But my hope is that that conversation expands out into the actual behaviors of the companies.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna make a general statement here, and I will expand on what I mean by it. But So the general statement is that when it comes to the glazing industry, and I found this across my experience, no one really gives a shit about it. Um, to further elaborate on your description of working with the tier ones, it's something that we point blank refuse to do. I think
Smart move, right?
the highest we went was tier two, and that came to a very abrupt end when we provided an estimate, a tender for, I think it was about an 18 grand roof light on a refurb in London for a tier two main contractor. The directors, I believe, had come from tier one, and they sent a 365 page subcontract order that required somewhere in the region of 27,000 signatures. I pretty much had to give my wife and kids away. So later that afternoon, they politely got told to fuck off.
Rightly
And
so.
actually, that purchase order became a running joke in our office. We used to hide it in people's desks and in people's cars and in people's bags. Um, I believe it's still in one of my ex-colleagues' golf bags. So that's how unseriously we
But
took.
even that, like, there is no look. I get that there's operationally, logistically, and administratively, there are a lot of hoops companies have to jump through and to protect themselves. But I feel that these contracts are sometimes overtly opaque, confusing, and hard to follow, simply so that as a subcontractor, you're like, the pressure to get the work and win the work is because it's matched to the prestige, but then the opaque and difficulty to understand these contracts sometimes at times it just seem like produced for a particular reason
I think
and not necessarily to empower the specialist subcontractor.
I think those contracts and that type of preparing for litigation, it blurs the line between jumping through hoops and putting your nuts in a burning ring of fire. And it's for me, it kind of feels like they're preparing not to pay you, and we see that across the board.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
see that
And look,
across the board.
take how many in that 24 months where we've lost 200 plus companies, a couple of them were tier ones, and the supply chain they take with them, it seems like the fact that you also have to pay to get to site, like you on those contracts, you're in the bin
Yeah.
before you're getting paid. I just don't see how we can continue like this, knowing what we know with the history of how we've been treated as a niche industry. I just don't know why people would want that work anymore.
No, no, and I don't think that many people will. I think it's an appetite that will gradually reduce, and I think one day there'll be a necessary correction where the main contractors don't have the resource and they don't have the network because people are just giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
eventually they might have to go. And I have heard of some tier ones that have maybe understood this in their own sort of businesses, and then actually had to reach out with their tails between their legs and say,
Look, we again, as even as you mentioned, we are painting with a thick brush here, and obviously not everyone is the same. And even I know that Neville and Waits Group, Neville Grumwald and the Waits Group are very conscious that this is in the shared conversation of parties within the industry, and I know they try very hard to not do that. And so again, we're painting with a thick brush, but we're painting with a thick brush because it is very clear that this exists.
absolutely, absolutely. And unfortunately, when that rhetoric is in the public domain, it's going to put off newcomers into that world, and eventually the resource pool will naturally run dry. So I think the tier ones need to do more to encourage this kind of new positivity and encourage people into their subcontractor lists. Like you say, people do have to invest a lot of money in compliance and certification and training, and making sure that you've got the certificates that are required to even produce a tender. So that you are in the hole before you've even won the job. And when you win the job, it's very simple. You do a job, you get paid. But yeah, we never we decided against going up to that sort of level. I've seen it from my installation days, and I don't like it. It's less about the glazing and more about the contract, and I don't think that's
Exactly. It's just it's not as fun, right? And especially
no.
with that getting into a getting into someone's home and dealing with the end user a bit more directly and following that, just getting that vivid, like direct feedback is just a lot more of a holistically enjoyable experience than, as you say, the contract meetings. They're getting to the end and saying, getting your bills right and against what they've expected to pay. Like it's just not a fun experience. And as I say, that I think the prestige of the work is becoming less and less, or is dwindling, shall we say?
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree with you.
Um, so yeah, no, you were so that was about halfway through. So do you want to continue more on CNA?
Yeah, yeah. So we we kind of diverted the business plan throughout the years, and it was relatively flexible. And I think it had to be because of the events of March 2020, which was kind of like the height or the midpoint of our business journey, and obviously the world started and stopped and started and stopped again very quickly. So we were quite a flexible and pliable business. So we were able to reach out for installation contracts, but where we really found our flow is in the supply only of product. So we manufactured, a relatively high end in the sector for trade anyway system, the Belgium system, and we did quite well doing that. We made a very nice product. We were the sort of forefront manufacturers and determined to produce the higher end product to the good standard, and we kind of stuck to that very well. And we produced product for some beautiful projects, some really nice homes. A lot of the higher end stuff that we produced was for the Devon and Cornwall coasts, and some of the really nice stuff around the lakes and the peaks. Not a lot
They've
down
got
here
so
where I
much.
am in Essex, because those kind of properties don't really exist very very often.
Well, I don't know. There's a client I work with down in Devon and Cornwall, and they've just got so much. There's still so much development that can go on. They've obviously the vistas, the way the projects look in situ is, yeah, it's absolutely like a fit for purpose for what we want to do in terms of the project delivery, marketing, and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what we did is we uncovered a little bit of a gap in the market for a fabricator that was niched into those kind of builds. The projects that carried somewhere between, I don't know, 60 and 200 grand's worth of installed glazing, which produced somewhere between a 30 and £100,000 trade supply order. Um, there's not too many fabricators in the country that can service those with a high end product. So
Well, even post, to go on to it from March 2020, I speak to a few different people and companies around Europe, and the one thing that I think that gets sort of lost gets lost when dissecting the problems the UK market has had is that so many other European clients that I work with, they have sort of local government and national government that's constantly trying to help them and push them forward, whereas here in the UK, when COVID landed, we really had our hands tied behind our back from the government, and then on top of that, you have landlords turning around and doubling rents in places, and it just felt like we've lost so much fabrication here, but not because we couldn't do fabrication, not because the companies were unable to deliver. It was just that we just had a local and national government that just didn't they put barriers up rather than put them down on top of increased energy, increased rents. Um, it just felt like death from a thousand cuts.
yeah, I think my opinions on government barriers and how they do and don't help us in entrepreneurship across the UK is probably a different conversation for me, because I could bore you with that or my opinions on that for ages. But yeah, I do agree, and we can do it here. But I think it just became a little bit of an unattractive proposition.
Well, exactly. Look again. There's a client that I know very well, very close to my heart, that they turned up and they were just told your rent has gone up 100%, like 100%. Like, so they had the fabrication unit here, and then they had the office the other side of the road, and it's like, well, so we can't just pay 200% more rent. It's we don't have a business, so they had to close the fabrication and they get stuff in from Europe. But like that, that won't be seen when the, when people are analysing the data of what goes on and what those things. I think those sort of bits are missed off, and they're just sort of assumed, oh well, it must have done something else wrong. It was like, no, we are not being supported in the way that you say other companies have across Europe. It feels like and especially with even just this year's budget, it feels like it was a very much like it's really not. It wasn't great news for small, medium-sized businesses.
No, no, it wasn't certainly, and I wish that I could say that I think we've had the worst of it. But I think we're probably just about peeling the lid back on what the kind of changes that are going to come in, and the, I think in some cases devastating impacts it's going to have on small business across the country, because it's just becoming a little bit unattractive. And I think actually this is kind of where I became really interested in doing what I'm doing now, because if you don't have your ducks in a row on those tight times, when things do make change, when things do change for you, that outside of your control, if you aren't in some way prepared or strong enough to resist some of those changes, you're unfortunately may end up another statistic, and a potentially good business, a good UK business that can now no longer service its industry because you kind of weren't ready.
I also think, and that's why I'm really glad you've come and speak to us today, because I think what you're doing now moving forward is it's just so vital to what we need. Because look, I just love people who like. I think, look, I'll rephrase it a different way. I think the greatest innovators are the people who have felt a problem and said, well, I'm going to supply a solution. And that comes from, that product, service, whatever it is, I think. And obviously you having been that side, having, and as we've mentioned, from high end commercial down to fabrication, installation, high end residential, you've touched the gambit. And I think that now taking everything you've learned in order to help the next set of small medium sized businesses to grow and scale is just such a vital thing, Chris. Because again, I think what this industry has never done bad is develop product and projects. I think we will always be brilliant at that. But as you know yourself, and as I'm aware, I think so. When you lose 200 companies, a lot of those employees who've lost jobs will think, well, look, I can do it better myself, and they'll set up a business and they'll move it forward in a granular sense. But I think we're just so what we really need is a focus on the numbers, a focus on business, a focus on finances, and that is ultimately not what a lot of the people in the industry are about. We're in it because we love the product and the project, and actually, not that they're dirty words or that they're just no one's good at everything, and so ultimately, product and project people they don't make the best the finance or financial sense, the best business sense, because again, what we see so time and time again, like a smart business person will not buy work. But we see it time and time again, don't we? So I think, yeah, I know that was a long way of saying I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing now, and I think it's an absolutely vital to an industry that could have probably done with that 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's important, and I'm happy to say, I'm not exactly Alan Sugar. I'm not the best business person in the country, but I do have a genuine desire and drive to inspire people to get better.
Even just to quickly cut in there, apologies, Chris, but even in the time I've known you, you've always been connecting people and doing stuff for other people. And sort of Dave here's, I've heard this guy needs this and X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's something very much. I think we share the same values with regard to that. But I don't think I think just having people in their corner is so vital. And you do that with yeah, you've always done that. I credit you
Yeah,
for that.
I think it's important. I think it's very important. And much like yourself, you try and put the best people together in the industry to help fight the industry's corner. And I think when you meet somebody that can actually make a positive difference in either the industry itself or maybe even someone else's business, why shouldn't you connect them?
Absolutely.
They're not detracting from your success. You're just succeeding together. And there's plenty enough in the market for two or three or even 100 people to build a network and grow their businesses together. So I'm not shy of sharing.
Mate. Oh, what a beautiful sentence. Like, genuinely, that's the one thing that, like, I didn't always, leaving Cantifix when I did to set up Framework, an element of it was like, one of the reasons I set it up was because being that side and having to develop and build teams, I got a sense that, look, what I wanted when I was at Cantifix was a service-led recruitment model that understood the product and the project, because we do so much hand holding. And I thought, well, if Cantifix needed it, probably other companies do too. So I set it up. But now, one thing I'm really happy about is, and it's only happened necessarily in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, definitely sort of post COVID, as we've come properly out of it, is that there is so much work there that you can have a network of companies, all who, in a sense, commercially are at odds with each other, but you can push each other along, that help each other out. Because when something falls out of your schedule, maybe they can help, or for that project that isn't suited for you, that you've got a quote in, maybe you could give it to them, and vice versa, because something could come back. And I think the businesses of the future are the collaborators, because ultimately, when we lose 200 companies in 24 months, what really it hurts me fundamentally, because it hurts my business, is that we lose, of those 200 companies, guaranteed we've lost 40% of that staff to other sectors. That's guaranteed. Cost of living crisis, they have transferable skills, and we don't have, there's not like the one glazing job board where they can all go. And so understanding that if yeah, high tide raises all ships, right? And ultimately, we need to foster more collaboration. And I guess, and I'd like to hear your feedback on this. I guess there's an element of, because there's a connective tissue to the white gold past, but also construction of the 90s, where it's like dog eat dog, enemies in the dirt. I just don't think, and as we've seen, I don't think that mindset is a progressive or one that will continue or should continue.
Yeah, I think possibly the way that the industry is fed with talent is largely from the bottom up. So the people that come into the industry at sort of labour level, low skill level, end up progressing through the businesses, but inherently they're taught by the people that are at the top. And the people at the top were once at the bottom. So the skill set never really changes, it just cycles.
I've never thought of it like that. That's really, yeah.
So I think that's a possibility. I do think that's a possibility. Whereas if fresh perspective was taken, how can we run this business differently to the rest of the glazing businesses in the country? And even just ask those questions, you may come up with some unique and innovative answers that will skyrocket you forward. You never know, but unless you ask the questions, the tricky thing for me there is that you're trying to innovate in an industry that is wholeheartedly disappointing, and it doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't feel, for me certainly, that you're going to reach that point at the end where you're going to go, I feel really good about this, because you mentioned at the start of this chat, it's joyless. It's joyless. Um, Also, the thing that I think I identified this probably a little bit too late. I believe there's a huge misalignment between what the industry can provide and what the buyer expects. And what that produces for the business is several additional points in the sales process, which are unnecessary and you shouldn't have and you don't have in other sectors. I'll explain. Compliance, for example, security, thermals. How much red tape and bullshit is there in the industry around that in glazing at the moment?
And also, even the propensity or the proclivity of certain companies to absolutely bullshit
Yeah,
what they can achieve.
yeah,
That's pretty harmful, especially when, if you're trying to do good work. And because look, I know it's happened to everyone. You get, you've quoted for a job, you find your competitors, you get the competitors quote, and you're looking at it, it's like, how the fuck can they achieve? Like, it's impossible.
yeah.
But they'll still do it.
There's companies, I think, still to this day selling 1.0 U values based on the centre pane of a double glazed unit. Who's policing this, David?
No one. But
Thank you.
I am working with someone when we are trying to create something that might challenge that.
Yeah, and great. great. I think that's fantastic. But the kind of industry players that are setting the legislations and the parameters, and no one's talking to building control. Building control aren't talking to building regs. Building regs aren't talking to the consumer. So at each point, these additional points of sale that I'm mentioning are you have to sell that you're compliant with three or four different things along the way, and then you have to sell yourself as a business, and then you have to sell your product.
I spoke to someone who comes from one of the, he's an ex-employee of one of the large system houses that we all know and love, and he's saying they're releasing product that doesn't comply. They know it doesn't comply. They don't care. I spoke to another salesman who says they've just put me out on to do the residential market. We don't have residential products. You look at the big systems houses, and when you come to business development manager, sort of you've got your engineers, your designers, whatever, your PMs. When you look at business development managers, they're such a big part of these organizations, and they'll throw product at a guy who's stolen the images off the IQ website. He's guaranteeing his work for 10 years. He's been in business for 8 months. It's just, it's like, again, there's so many data points at which you can point to and say, that's not helping, that's not helping, that's not helping, that's not helping, that's not helping. Yeah.
But so the knowledge requirement that puts on the characteristic of person that we mentioned earlier on. This is the business owner. This is the product person that now needs to become an expert in the legislation and in the guidelines that are about as clear as a bowl of mud, so that they can sell all of that to a client that doesn't give a shit. And then now they're even further neglecting how the business is running, and it's a really shitty rabbit hole to start climbing down. And I'm an in the detail kind of guy. I'm a very logical. It has to make sense. I need to understand it, and if I don't understand it, I'll keep digging. It's kind of what makes me a pretty good troubleshooter. But when you spend the amount of time down this rabbit hole that the systems houses don't know the answers to, the
Or want
government,
to know.
they don't want to know. The government are producing the information about what we have to build, but they don't really know even what's possible. And then you've got the client that's all they want to do is buy some windows. How do you make that happen? This is why I say it's a really disappointing industry, that the very product that's being designed for the consumer doesn't consider the consumer. And I think that's a very unique. It's a very unique industry for that.
Do you, is that by design or by some other, not malevolent force, but by, a lack of understanding or at least sort of value led decision making?
I think it's kind of got to a point where it's gone a little bit too far. I think it's a roundabout, and it's a competition between the systems houses to constantly innovate. There's no time; they just have to be first, and it's a difficult hamster wheel to get off, because none of these multi-million-pound companies are going to want to say, "Hold on a minute, let's have a look at what we've got. Does it align with what the industry actually needs at the moment?" They'll just carry on producing, throwing more products into the market, which then go on actually to be heavily white labeled, which produces another little filter point. And I just think it's overly confusing. I If I was making a prediction, and I made this for the first time around 12 months ago, I think at some point, because of the way that we build in the UK, and this is a comment on the housing stock, the way that we build in the UK, and the speed at which we actually need to build, and the quality at which we need to start building, I think we may see a huge shift in the design of properties and the procurement of glazing into standard square and rectangular composite windows, all procured from Europe. And I think we'll create that. We'll create that for ourselves. I don't know when it'll be, but if I hazard a guess, I think that might come.
It's a bit of a worrying trajectory there, isn't it? Because ultimately, as well, when you look at the facade side, once you go up that side, how many national operators are doing the big work? It's all European companies, right? It's all transnational companies. And again, I have sympathy for the UK operators, because I don't think it's just a case of the UK operators are crap. I think it's, again, what we mentioned. You have governmental, administrational, and sort of logistical ham fisting and your hands constantly being tied behind your back. I also think, even connecting it to something else we talked about, do you think, and I'm sort of riffing here, as to what you said of, people come in at the bottom of the rung, and like maybe it's different for some sort of, maybe sort of technical sales roles. If you've got someone who's sort of like yourself, technically astute, who can get into details pretty quickly, they can kind of come over, learn glass, learn product pretty quickly. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's weather. It doesn't change in that respect, or it's amorphous. But the fact that there's no barrier to entry in this industry. It's not a status, as opposed to, say, being a doctor. There is a high bar to entry to being a doctor. There's a lot of studying. You have to commit to doing it, but that's also why the wages are good. And I think ultimately we are crying out for skill. We are crying out for more bodies. But it feels sometimes a bit like the Qatar World Cup. We will throw human suffering at it and pile the bodies up just as long as it gets done. And regardless of the value of the individual, the quality, and their values, we just keep piling on. Do you think that gets into the mix somewhere?
I think you could say that's an argument across construction. So the specialist trade contractor, I think there's many particular trades that would find themselves in having this exact conversation, and I think it's possible that the fix to that might be a drastic increase in modular construction and simple construction methods. So I think it might be, rather than combating how we fix the skill gap, we de-skill construction, which when you think about it, is exactly what happens on the high-rise apartment blocks and the unitized stuff. It's, you design the panel and then you times it by 5,000.
Mm.
The Europeans build houses based on preset designs and wall panels. It's de-skilled, but it's actually, you'll find, better quality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, look, and I was this that. Well, I was just going to say that's not a remark on the quality, is it, or the build level? No, not at all.
No, no, no. And actually, I think some of that information there kind of supports my prediction about what's going to happen to the bulk of the glazing supply.
Do you think there's a sort of like a British cultural part of it then as well? That sort of best of British, where we actually feel like it's something about, it's just the way we do it. Like we are better at these things, when actually the reality is we're not.
Yeah, I think possibly, and I think this actually loops back into something you were saying a little while ago, and this is why I think things don't change, and this is on a national level. We don't change because I think we're scared of it. I think we're scared to think outside the box, and I don't think that's our fault. I actually think that's the fault of the what I would call the rat race, or the system that is provided for us to be educated in and live and work in by the British sort of infrastructure. We're taught to stay within the lines. We're not really taught to take or manage risk. We're not educated on how life works
Or money.
or money works. We're not taught how debt and financing works, and we only really learn about those things when it's too late.
When we're in debt.
When we're in debt, and we actually spend time wishing that we weren't in debt. So I think that kind of loops back into what you were saying about the business owners who are reluctant to get in help because it makes you feel weak. And I know that because I've been there. I've been in the shoes, and you do feel weak. You feel scared. You think it's failure by admitting that you should bring somebody in to help you with the stuff that you don't know. And it's possible that the specialist trades are reluctant to bring the person in, or the institution in that's going to help with that, because they feel scared and fail and like a failure.
How do you get that message across? How do you, because I can actually point to data. I have clients who have business, like who have decision makers and business leaders who come in from other sector, and they just don't care about it. It's not that they don't care about glass, aluminium, windows, doors, whatever. It's just that they don't care of it in the same way that people who've grown up in the industry have. That fundamental, like, we like some products, we don't like others. Like there's just this, like, yeah, internal bias around glazing and different systems, etc., etc. But they just come in, and they see it as a product. They want a business to be successful, whether they were selling cake, cars, or glazing. They would make the business a success because they have skills and strategies that transcend industry. How do we get that message across? Because absolutely, like what you're doing, the services you want to offer moving forward, I think are the only things that can save us. So how do we get that message across to the small medium sized guys? Because I think you're right. They'll be looking at it, and they'll have probably have enough experience of previous bosses and companies where they're like, well, I can do it better. But they, again, as we've said, it's granular improvement, and we can't have granular. We need leaps. We need bounding improvements.
So the answer to that is I don't really know at the moment. I'm kind of at the start of this journey and this process, which I'm trying to remain linear on the end goal. However, to remain linear on the end goal, I'm going to have to divert out into several other places, and those places include. I'd love to know what's included in a university business degree. Because if the university business degree is probably the most commonly known and respected thing to create business leaders, the thing that I find really interesting there, though, is that you're taught a business degree at university by a 45 grand a year employee. How is that correct? To be taught entrepreneurship by someone that's taken a paid salary job and paid
Yeah,
loads
yeah,
of
yeah.
money.
Someone who's clearly risk averse. Someone
Yeah,
who, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. Uh, Again, but to be honest, let's be honest. I think, and this isn't a that profound a thought, because I think this conversation has been in the public lexicon for a long time. Is that, and even if you mentioned it, what does school do? They teach you to sit up, sit down, say yes, say no. They don't teach. School doesn't teach a ballerina. School doesn't teach artists to be artists. It doesn't teach singers to be singers. And it is very much like, and again, not that it's bad that it does this. Obviously, we need to be taught structure. You need to be taught how to be a member of society by following the rules society dictates, because those lessons are vital. But ultimately, we could. I think that point is so well made, Chris. That yeah, maybe that system is creating things that ultimately are a little bit shallow in their offerings.
yeah, yeah. And I said I mentioned the kind of the education system a short while ago, and one of the best examples I can give is if you look right towards the end of primary school and then again at the end of secondary school, how are you tested, alone or in a group?
In a group, yeah,
How are
big
you graded, alone or in a group?
the big exams, right?
So if I had a school and a chance to change the education facility, I would maybe take that group of 30 children and I would say, go and split yourselves into groups of six, but it's your job to figure out who your six is. I'm not going to tell you that. Here's the problem, go and solve it. And kind of encourage kids, and I think this is the same for business leaders, find their six, find where your skill sets are, what the missing skill gaps are, find the person that fills the skill gap and collaborate.
I love that.
Now, I would sit on a geography test and I would fail. I am shit at geography.
Snap.
My, when I'm driving my car, my pigeon's instinct really lets me down, and that's disappointing because I hate math. I shouldn't
Pigeon's
like math.
instinct.
I'm not good at it. But there are things that I'm not so bad at, and there are people that are good at geography, and I'm possibly good at the things that they're shit at. Why aren't we encouraging find your six, find your team, find there's so many benefits there. If you're able to negotiate with other people, you'll do well in life. If you're
And
able
again, is it
to,
is it Jinis Angenu said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And ultimately, if you get someone out of a hole, that becomes embodied. That they feel it inside, like in their literal bones. And I think just the power of collaboration and the look. I you know we came from the people who lived in the trees. We came down from the tree into the savannah. We moved out. Civilizations were built. Yada yada yada. We are group people, and I think ultimately inside us, there's that like there's something a real the power of human connection, and you're being pulled along by other people together. I think is a fundamental like require it's food for the soul, and that can exist. You can talk about those things in a commercial and business sense too, and I think those are some of the things that often gets lost when, especially on the how do we talk on LinkedIn? Everything's brilliant. I've got the best job. I've just done the best quarter. I was like, there's no like, yeah, there's very little food for the soul on those platforms where ultimately it's still part of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, you may have seen I talk on LinkedIn about how shit things were.
And again, what you say is you've said it a couple of times, and that it's so true. You start the business, you build your own prison cell. Quintessentially, you become engaged in it because it is. It's a thankless fight. A thankless, especially in this industry.
Agree, I agree. But I think if we could change the way that we're educated, and the schooling and the youth team building, part of the upbringing, I think we could not just change construction, but I think we could change the country quite significantly. But I don't think we're going to do that because they don't want us to. The government do not want us to.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, certainly. So if everybody in the country was entrepreneurs and everybody was championing small business, who would have the jobs and pay the high tax?
Yeah. Oh,
So
look, I think what's become clear is that the government is quintessentially administrators for big business. In the in the sort of 30 years where I've been cognizant of the machinations of government, I feel it's like this dwindling return, just diminishing return each and every administration, and so it just feels like they're not they're not here for me, and I don't mean that in a I'll be squashed down by the mat. It just feels though like I just have to take the dictates and just hope it's not too crushing each time.
yeah, and I think that is a common theme as well. It's just about good enough to tolerate.
Yeah. I think human progress is a constant, but as it goes up and you zoom in, it becomes fractal. And I just think we have here like a proper 15, maybe 20-year dip, and hopefully, we can build stuff that's just better. And my hope is that yeah. Let's just do
Okay.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Before
I'll see you on the other side of that, and we'll see what.
when our AR overlords have us down these magnesium mines or something, I don't know. What would you moving sort of what's it doesn't have to be five, it can be one, but just sort of some skills, like just say you were speaking to the younger you, just as you started. What are some sort of skills and strategies you think are vital to succeeding in this wild west that is glazing?
So I'll try and keep this glazing specific. I would say for anybody launching a new business in the glazing sector at the moment, find your niche. Find your niche, find your ICP, and spend as much time as you need to mastering that before shiny object syndrome kicks in.
I think that's so wise because there's so many just window and door company. If you can find that niche and be just master that, I think that's something again that because we don't, it feels like to again non-business or sort of people with that sort of inkling or intonation is that well, if I've only got a couple of products, I'm like if I do everything, everyone can come to me. And it just isn't that just doesn't it's not how it works, is it? And if you look at this sort of the people who've got to get into sort of like specialist fire products, you take aluminium fire systems as an example, that just that real niche, like it's the niche within the niche, and they're very good at it. And I think that's such a great point, Chris.
It helps with all other facets of your business as well. So again, this comes on to, do glazing businesses really know how to market their product when there's so many products being sold to such a diverse range of customer profile? do you really know what that sales process looks like when your marketing has kind of done its work and you've funneled people into your sales process? Do you know enough about that customer to speak to them and engage with them in the way that they need to be engaged with to sort of move them towards a sale? So if you don't know that and you cast such a wide net, you inevitably get involved in selling stuff that you don't really know enough about to people that you don't know enough about, and this is going to fill the misalignment because you're not going to know the compliance, the security, the thermals. You're not going to know what the requirements in terms of knowledge is of this customer, and you're just going to fluff it. You're going to say, yeah, 1.0. Yeah, that's and you're going to make it worse for yourself and for the industry. So if you know your niche and you know your client, you know how to speak about the product and how to speak to the customer, then you can move on to the next round of headaches. But keep it a narrow, keep it a smaller amount of headaches until you fix them. Don't yeah. Software is another one. The software providers for the fenestration industry, especially in aluminium, in current times, I think have got a lot of work to do.
Could you
Not
again? So yeah, could you? I'd love to hear more on that.
yeah. They all seem to be very product focused. But then what you have to do is you have to have a platform in today's day and age that assists you in running the business. Now try and find something that actually works for your business that connects the manufacturing and the sale of the product to the running and the operation of the business. That becomes very clunky.
Yeah, very
It's
clunky.
2025.
You're often like you look at some of the sort of desktops people are operating is it's a mess, isn't it? It's a mess of systems,
It
a
is.
mess of systems that don't talk to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You look at the market leading ones. I don't know if I'm allowed to name names, um, but Logical, for example, well, I say great. I don't think it's great anymore. I think it's got a bit shit.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I
Oh,
think
and
it's
again, I think ultimately when it was designed and at the time for that period, it was brilliant. But yeah, we have moved a lot far, like exponential. You know, technology's exponential curve means that even if you were on the gradient going up, that was back then. We've moved so far. Again, I think we are probably on the we are within 12 to 24 months of I think some of the just eye-watering technological developments that would put those things that sort of those OSs to sort of shame to a degree, right?
yeah, yeah. I think the introduction of AI into, I would say, the industry, but life at the moment, it's difficult to comprehend just how powerful that's going to be. So I think you kind of need to be first or one of the first to the party in this industry by leveraging the technology and figuring out what its power is. But whether the rest of the industry will keep up with it or not, I don't know.
I think there's an element where that a lot of I think we have a generation of business leaders and the decision makers that just it feels like that's the step they're not willing to make because they look down the road and think, well, in 5 to 10 years, I probably won't be here. So I'm not going to overhaul it for the better. And that's a large, well, we're talking about 60, 70% of the companies operating with that sort of mindset. It doesn't feel like, we won't be the first of the party.
No.
I
Um,
received an email, sort of round robin from one of the big industry sort of marketing and sort of business solutions companies, and they were talking about an AI in their newsletter to businesses, almost like they were explaining toys to kids. You know what I mean? Here's what you can do with it. You can make pictures. You could, and it's like, I'm not saying that it was. I'm not trying to indicate that it was condescending or being mean spirited, but I just think it illustrated how ill prepared people are to adopt this technology in a large scale way that might fundamentally benefit us. And I also think it suffers from the current maxim of if it bleeds, it leads. So fundamentally, when AI is talking about on mainstream, it's how it's going to kill us or destroy us. When fundamentally, it's just really amazing software, right? It's just brilliant software with efficacy and efficiency that just beats the current standards.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I have a natural reservation on AI as much as I champion it for business, and I think you're silly and foolish if you aren't looking at it in your business at the moment. I'm certainly looking at it in mine, but my fear is more for what it's going to do to our already fractured human connection, where we become so incredibly lonely because life is an app and it's a passing video and it's a comment that's not even made by a person anymore. So what that looks like for the future of human interaction in the next 2, 3, 4 years, I don't know.
I'll take that tangent and I'll run with it, Chris. No, no. Again, as a bona fide nerd, as a someone who's always been, I'm of the age where like I can use computers, very interested in them, but as soon as they fall down, I don't fucking clue what I'm doing. But I have a friend who's a digital director for one of the world's largest book publishing companies, and when the when the AI conversation was starting, we were, we'd share stories about it, and we'd talk about it. And I think, look, me and you are roughly around, probably within. I'm 45, so when I grew
19.
up, oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, I forgot.
That is badly weathered.
But like one thing that, like, I've got a 3-year-old son, and one thing that you can see happening, right, is what I saw when text to picture came out. I was like, well, you know where that goes. That 10 years time, I'm going to say, give me the Terminator, but I want the cast to be Last of the Summer Wine or the EastEnders. Like it will have the power to, you make your own film, right? You make your own content, but that will atomize people to such a degree. Do you remember when I came into school, I saw Terminator 2. Everyone saw Terminator 2, and you had this shared culture. And you're right, we're losing those things because everything is becoming so atomized and for the individual. But again, another thing to go back on something we've talked about, you're right. It's all like life's becoming an app, where ultimately you don't need apps. You need people. You need human touch. Like it's so important, and I do think you're absolutely right. My hope, though, is that we know this, that other people know this, and that ultimately that we we can address it and build technology that is more harmonious. But it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that we will.
No.
And I can imagine a state though where, like, everyone has the Google glasses on, and we just don't even see the same world anymore. We at least the outside is the same place that we all see. But my fear is even that might go away.
It may well. It may well. I think there's so many simple things in life that give us joy, and actually staring at a 6-inch tall by 2-inch wide phone screen is not one of those things. We're so connected to it. We're going to be so connected to being online. We're so connected with the outside of our friendship circle that we're neglecting how important it is to be connected to people. I try and do things like have conversations on trains. You know, put my
Oh,
phone away and speak to someone.
I think we are so scared to be bored. We're so scared to not be have the dopamine cycle, right? It terrifies us. Where like I'm I'm aware of it, so I'll often, like, yeah, like of an evening once the boys down. If like, depending if I've got something to work on, I'll work on it. But I'm very happy to just try sit, try and be bored for a while, play with the cat, or like just do something that isn't necessarily giving me this huge dopamine release. But look, to finish on, what's a conversation in the industry that we're not having that we should be having?
How can we make this better?
Nice, and that's it's a broad question.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer to that.
No, but I think you do, Chris. I think you've mentioned it quintessentially. It's like, don't forget that we're all humans. Like, engage in collaboration, be smart, like get in business people, like lean on other skill. Like these are all things you've said.
Yeah, but all right. Well, maybe I don't know the answer to how we implement that. I think maybe that is the answer. Why don't we try and make it better? We've got a lot of, I say we've got a lot of work to do. Like I'm going to take that challenge on. I'm not.
You are to a
um,
degree.
no, I fell out of love with the industry. You know, my if I happen to get involved with owners and entrepreneurs that are in the glazing industry now, it's not because of my love of the glazing sector. It's because of my want and desire to make business better for people and actually improve the quality of their lives.
Hmm.
And I think there would actually be times when I would encourage risk-taking entrepreneurs that are bright, but maybe don't have the right business model within glazing to get out. And I think one of the things that I'm looking at doing is working with people to actually make sure that their pricing model is viable, all things considered, not just the cost of a bifold and how much they charge to fit it. For example, the business model has to be viable, and I'm not going to be surprised if there's many business models that aren't,
Yeah,
which I
I
think
share that lack of surprise.
it's why we're seeing that decline. So either the model isn't their model isn't viable, the industry isn't allowing us a viable model anymore. And if you've got some risk energy and some enthusiasm to deploy into a business, why not be in one that's much simpler and that's going to make you money? And it doesn't. I don't like saying that because glazing's been a part of my life for 15, 20 years, and I like seeing the finished product, but the hoops you've got to jump through to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah, the human suffering to arrive at that point almost.
Yeah,
It's a cost benefits analysis, right?
yeah. When there are business models out there at the moment that are far simpler, far less moving parts, and far more profitable.
And have product that isn't so less complicated.
Yes,
Because
exactly,
it's yeah, because
exactly
yeah.
that. But it's not great for me to say that because I'm a glazing person, by design.
But one of the things I really want to thank you for, Chris, though, is this is clearly your honest appraisal, and that's all people can ask for. So thank you so much for today. I really thank you
No, you're
profoundly.
very
Thank
welcome.
you.
Very welcome. Good chatting.
And look, let's do it again.
Yeah, yeah. Why not? Why not?
Absolutely.
Before I depart, David? Is it all right if I leave you with something which you can cut this off the end if you want? I don't care.
No, no, no. Go for it. I was going to ask. Just is there something you'd like to finish on?
Yeah. So this is bigger picture, and I think it applies to everybody. And I was having a conversation the other day, and I've done some thinking for myself. Put yourself, or this can sound morbid, but put yourself on your deathbed, surrounded by the 5 to 10 people that actually give a shit about you in this life and that you actually give a shit about, because it's probably not many more than that if you want to get deep. And just try and list 3 things that you are going to say you wish you did more of, and 3 things that you're going to say you wish you did less of.
I know what they are already.
So if you know what they are now, as a 45-year-old person, you've not got long in the grand scheme of things to correct that. So I would say don't be sitting on your deathbed, and no one's ever going to say, I wish I spent another 10 hours a week on Instagram, or I wish I'd had more of my communications with ChatGPT. No one's going to say, I wish I'd bumbled through another 10 years in the glazing industry.
I wish I'd made 100 more cold calls.
No one's going to say those things. So whether it's about business or life, try and figure out what you're going to say that you are glad you did, and just fucking get on with it.
Thank you, Chris. Where can people find you?
Hiding in my shed quite a lot, and LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a website which is www.smesuccess.co.uk. I'm dedicating the next phase of my life, while I've got this energy and enthusiasm, to helping small to medium business owners grow, systemize, scale, and enjoy their lives more.
I'd like a thoroughly beautiful endeavor, and I will try and I'll connect as many people as I can. I think what you're doing is remarkable. Thank you, Chris.
Really appreciate it, Dave. Thanks very much.
Take care, buddy.
Take care.